Good morning. I'm Obenshain with Edison Electric Institute, and welcome you to our panel today on CCS. Is it ready for prime time? We're going to offer three different perspectives on CCS. You heard from John on the technology side. Shannon Angielski will talk first, and she will go through an alternate plan for research, development, and demonstration of not only the technology but advanced coal systems. And then our Burrows from Tampa Electric will talk about the small-scale capture and hopefully storage project that's ongoing in the Polk IGCC plant down in Florida. So without further ado, Shannon.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you all for inviting us to be here today, Karen, for any other panel. For those of you that are not familiar with the Coal Utilization Research Council, this is a list of our members, as you can see here. I just wanted to talk briefly about why we're here today to talk about an industry perspective on what we think future technology needs are for coal-based systems. We are an organization that's been around since about 1998, and as you can see, we bring in a broad range of the industry, including the academic side of this. We're an organization dedicated to continued coal utilization through technology-based solutions. We share the view that despite challenges that this industry may face, environmental performance challenges, cost challenges, that technology is the solution to overcome those challenges. We've seen it happen in the past. We know it can happen in the future. And so one of our guiding documents, I guess, or foundation of our organization is something called our Advanced Technology Roadmap that we have. It's a dynamic sort of living document that we update about every 2 or 3 years. This is something that we publish and we put together with the Electric Power Research Institute. And what that program does is it guides the technology development steps necessary that we think are needed in order to achieve that type of environmental performance from coal-based systems, as well as to achieve a cost of electricity that will be, in this current roadmap, competitive with other low-carbon alternatives in the future. So in addition to that, what we do is we advocate for federal policies and programs that will implement these technology-based solutions. So the roadmap is just one program that we advocate for, but we look at the broader range of the technology-based solutions in order to sustain this industry as well. So some of the principles upon which that guide our organization and the collective thinking of our organization for technology is to, one, preserve low-cost electricity from the fleet today, from the existing fleet. The second is to ensure the preservation of future energy supplies. And I'll get into that in a minute, but that means we want coal-based options in the future. We don't want to rely on just the natural gas solution that we're seeing emerge from today's markets. And then the third is that we all recognize, one of the principles is that we recognize that any new coal-based system will have to address emissions of CO2, whether that's through efficiency-based mechanisms or whether it's through carbon capture and sequestration, as you heard John talk about, which the DOE program is principally focused on right now. Our program is a little bit broader than that, so I just want to touch on that briefly. So these are the current drivers that drive our collective thinking as an organization as we think about what the technology solution set is. So, of course, I just mentioned low-cost natural gas. How do we compete with that? It also performs environmentally without added control systems, for example. So we need to be able to compete with that in the future. We're also looking at an industry, and you all are very aware of this, but we're seeing very slow load growth. And so how do we develop technology solutions when there's no real impetus or driver for the need for new capacity, for example? The other is, as I mentioned, addressing emissions of CO2. And lastly, this is one that I want to touch on because I know that this really impacts many of you here, but that is with respect to the aging coal fleet and what the value of that fleet is well into the future and how we are going to rely on that to continue to provide, at least as EIA projects, 40% of our electric power generation in the future. But let me just start with what you know today. This is just the AHA sort of graphic of this is an impact impact of MATS, what we're expected to see from coal plant retirements and shutdowns as a result of MATS. I think I wasn't here yesterday, but I heard that there was quite a bit of discussion about the Clean Power Plan. We can expect this, or this is what EPA is indicating. The Clean Power Plan impacts will be on the existing fleet. So if you take all that into consideration, 195 gigawatts left out of the current 300 plus gigawatts that we currently have installed today, and then you take that in combination with the fact that we need to rely on that 195 gigawatts well into the future, what does that mean for the existing fleet and preserving that for our economy? This is thanks to NETL. It's a graphic that I just want to briefly share with you from an analysis that they've done of the EIA projections. And this analysis shows you that if we are to rely on that 195 gigawatts well into the future, you can see in 2040, the age of that fleet is on average 60 to 65 years of age. And it's also expected to operate on a much more flexible basis. It's going to be dispatched behind gas, it's going to be dispatched behind renewables. It won't be running, as you all know, as a baseload fleet. And so the wear and tear, the performance, the maintenance, what does that mean? We haven't had to experience that yet as an industry. So we don't know what the solutions are to make sure that the performance of that fleet will be able to run at what at least EIA is also projected is a 70 to 80% capacity factor at the age of 60 to 65 years old. And we see a drop-off, an absolute drop-off in capacity factors, at least from how we have historically seen our generation fleet run after 20 years, down to even a 20% capacity factor. So there's a lot to take into consideration if we are going to rely on this for 40% of our generation going well into the future. So one of the things that we would advocate for as an organization, let's go back to this, we need a solution set for the existing fleet that may require technology-based solutions that have to be considered. There's a lot that goes into that, and SR notwithstanding, we recognize that there are other challenges that are not just technology-based, but we'd like to consider that there is a need to look at a technology-based solution for preserving the existing fleet. With respect to CO2 capture and CCS, this is just to make the point that we have challenges, and I know that we are going to talk about some of the technology challenges, and John also talked about the DOE program and how they're trying to overcome those challenges, but the costs are just not competitive today. One point I'd like to show too is just, this is the wind cost. We put that in there. We recognize it's not a baseload, it's not baseload generation, but it also doesn't incorporate the cost that you have to include when you consider backup generation for some of these things. So at the end of the day, how you tip the scale and balance this out is one way to think about it, but CCS is just too expensive. So how do we overcome that? So the technology program that our members are focused on are, you heard John mention transformational technologies. We think about, as an organization, transformational technologies, not just with respect to CO2 capture, but also with respect to advanced energy conversion systems. So the way that we like to define what we think of as transformational is we're not talking about incremental improvements over state-of-the-art or some of these technologies that might be improvements. We're talking about step changes. We're talking about new ways of looking at this. And with respect to advanced energy conversion systems, that includes not just putting a black box on the back end of a system, as we recognize that that's part of the portfolio that needs to be developed from a technology solution set, but we also want to look at some of these technologies that could be put in place in the next 10 to 20 years, when we're going to see a lot of retirements potentially across the United States, that can be complete replacement options and that produce as a function of their conversion system a concentrated stream of CO2. There are more pathways that we think need to be considered or at least emphasized, and this is one of those potential areas. Again, we need solutions for the existing fleet to run more flexibly. We don't know what those solutions are yet, but we hope that we'll be examining those. As well as technologies that are applicable to multiple feedstocks. Some of these transformational technologies can run on gas as well as coal. So we need to think about having that flexibility for the operators as they consider what their options need to be in the future. Some of the others is to respond to what those drivers are. Some of these transformational energy conversion systems can be modular, or they are more compact, so they can respond and help you all in your planning to respond to that incremental load growth, or to replace what may not be needed as an 800 megawatt system, but you may only need 200 megawatts of replacement capacity. And we want cost-effective options to be available. And we recognize that we need to accelerate the development of this in order to have those options available in the next 10 to 20 years. So the program that we have put together really touches on these 3 points that I have just brought up. Existing fleet solutions, something that we need to do right now. We heard one of the, in the midterm or program that we also need to do right now is to consider building new coal systems, highly efficient coal systems. We heard today, Karen showed me an article that was released today that the EPA's proposed new source performance standard may in fact be an efficiency-based standard that would not require CCS. So great, let's start building ultra-supercritical plants. Let's get steel on the ground and then consider how to do CCS when the option becomes available, when it's cost effective. But continue developing those solutions and leave the option open on those systems to retrofit later or put on those systems at a time when the technology is commercially available. And then the other is, as I mentioned, this longer term program. We recognize we need solutions now. Let's invest in the R&D that's needed to make those options available in the future. And that's essentially what our program is based on. I just want to close on this slide. I know my time's up, but this is just to say that this is our roadmap update right now. We are focused on, John mentioned pilots. We believe that jumping from small pilot to trying to scale up to these large systems is not the cost effective and probably the most efficient way of trying to invest federal dollars in developing these solutions. So we have really heavily emphasized this need for large pilots in order to bring in the capital that's needed in order to get these solutions in the nearer term operational and to better understand what they are capable of accomplishing. So with that, I will end there if that's okay, and I believe we'll have questions. Available later or no? Okay.
I'm Byron, Burrows with Tampa Electric, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about the project that we've got going on, drilling down a little more in the weeds, but I think it fits in nicely with the dialogue and kind of telling the story, get a good sense for where everything is. One of the objectives to summarize our warm gas cleanup project, which I'll go into in detail. It's kind of what the project was designed to do, what it has been doing in demonstration, and then maybe just a real brief discussion about other things that might come from it. Tampa Electric Company is a small, relative mid-size, I guess, investor-owned utility, third largest investor-owned utility in Florida, with the 2,000 square miles, 700,000 customers, and 3 main generating plants, and one of them is Polk Power Station, located in southwest Polk County on reclaimed phosphate lands. We got 920 megawatts from 5 units, and we are expanding some existing 4 simple cycle units to combined cycle in the next couple of years. And it's been, I think a lot of people I've talked to around here have been to Polk Power Station. It's one of those, it's a Department of Energy grant. It was a demonstration point for the technology, one of the first in the country. And this sort of kind of describes, I think you heard about a lot of detail about the DOE's program in general, what their objectives are. This is what the kind of a picture of what the RTI project looks like, what the kind of a depiction of the different systems, desulfurization, CO2 capture, warm gas reactors. The objective is to mitigate, design, and scale up risks. So the next step would be a commercial size facility. This one is also going to verify capital and operating costs. We'll talk a little bit about those. And the plan is to capture more than 90% of carbon dioxide. Then, continued research and development for applications of the chemicals. And so trying to look at all of the elements that go into the sorbent-based projects and try to improve those. A more detailed look at it. This shows some of the sulfur removal system. It's a very regenerable product that's been. We'll talk about a little bit. And I got a slide that kind of shows how the development of that's come about. But I think the big picture about it, though, is that the current system, we have a current system that removes sulfur, and that's one of the things that makes IDCC viable, and we built it in the mid-90s. But this system predominantly will allow for more effective removal of sulfur with less temperature and pressure changes. And it's also the same kind of processes will help remove CO2, just different parts of the plant. So this is a 50 megawatt size demonstration project. So to kind of walk through some of the how long it takes for a project like this to come about. 1990 started with the sorbent R&D and the process research and development. 2001 had the sorbent. That was kind of the breakthrough. And then I think that part of it, we'll kind of see some of the results, has been very successful. And 2006 through 8 had the pilot testing at Eastman Chemical Company plant site. And then now we've been since 2010 on to engineering, construction, and then we're operational on the sulfur part of it, and we still have some work to do for the carbon capture part of it. This is another kind of way to look at it with kind of the timeline with some pictures. This is one picture here of what it currently looks like. This whole system here compared to this is the previous pilot testing that was occurred. So you see kind of the scale. And the participants are Research Triangle Institute, RTI, there's a project management and technology, again the technology, Tampa Electric's the host site, and we also providing operations support how to integrate with our system. We're sending the syngas back to our power plant, generating electricity with it. Engineering, you can see the engineering, BASF with the technology for the MDEA solution, and then DOE is a partner, and then obviously some of the previous participants, Eastman Chemical, with their bringing their pilot test experience in. This is how it kind of fits in with TECO's current plant. I won't spend too much time on that, but air separation unit, the syngas feeds into the gasifier, and then at this point we separate. There's a carbonyl sulfide, which is a little different process. It's harder to remove in the conventional way, so it needs some conversion. Then basically remove the sulfur. We make sulfuric acid with it at our plant. There's a market for that in the phosphate industry. And then here's the electricity part of it. So this part is the sulfur removal, and so you can see that this slipstream just sort of works right side by side with it. And here's how the slipstream plays in. So you basically same kind of processes side by side, but with again improving the technology. Here's a little bit of information about what a pilot plant versus a demonstration and commercial plant would be. And so this is what the full plant is. It's got some footprint, so it's directly scalable, and this is an important phase that needs to be successful before it moves on. And here's some of the metrics that the project is designed to improve, like increase overall IDCC efficiency by 10%, reduce capital expense by 15%, electricity cost by 10%, water consumption and wastewater, as well as the reducing the nitrogen necessary. And then with chemicals, also trying to improve the knowledge base and expand on that, on the solvent improvements that we've had so far. So here's kind of the performance to date. We've had, safety first. We've had over 55,000 person hours of operations without lost time accident or first aid incident. Over 2,000 hours of RTI sorbent injection, and it's a good time to say that This project was part of stimulus funds, and the project deadline to complete all of the objectives is September of this year. And so we're making good progress on the sulfur part. And so there's been some good, although we need more, I think we need more time, and we may try to, I think there's an effort to try to get more time to further demonstrate these things. But so far they've had good, the sorbent attrition rate, that's one of the objectives, is to minimize loss of the sorbent, and one of the things with replenish, that's a capital cost that we're trying to improve upon. They are achieving very high levels of total sulfur removal for both the hydrogen sulfide and the carbonyl sulfide. And then like I said, sulfur capacity of the sorbent has been steady with no sign of deactivation. So that's an important milestone. And then we have gotten the clean syngas, albeit without the CO2 removal, to the combustion turbine. We've also sent another important part of it is the sulfur part, making a product out of it, which we hope to expand that concept a little bit more. But they've successfully been sending that. That's one of our important revenue streams for the power plant, and so that's been demonstrated, as well as we've gotten started the process of the CO2 removal, but there's been some technical difficulties with heat exchangers and some things like that have prevented kind of completion of that part of the process. So we need more time to optimize that. The plan was originally to capture 300,000 tons. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time real quick on just showing you another element that, as Karen mentioned, we ultimately had hoped to demonstrate the sequestration part of it. We had some interesting synergies at Polk Power Station where we're doing a reclaimed water project, and we were drilling some in order to dispose of the RO reject part of that, cleaning up the reclaimed water. This is kind of a really interesting project that bears its own presentation. But we had these wells that were 8,000-foot wells, and and we did some modeling in concert with the University of South Florida. It looked like everything was okay. So I'll just spend a few minutes talking about that. This picture shows the power plant footprint, and you can see some injection wells. They had 2 injection wells, and the other wells are just monitoring wells. And then when we modeled the injection, what it would look like, 300,000 tons, and that this grid there is 15 kilometers kind of square. And so basically, you'll just see the magnitudes compared to after a year over time. I'll scroll to the slide, and you can kind of see that the concept of injecting the CO2 and the wastewater has some interesting synergies, and it would not go beyond the plant site. So I just kind of scroll through those. You can kind of see how that would work. The plant site's pretty big for this reclaimed phosphate land, and I'll stop there. I think we would look at the costs, but the sequestration part of it, I'll just say that we'd originally planned to do that. That was going to be our kind of host site's funding part of it, but we did run into permitting issues with the project funding having to stop this year. There was no mechanism. We couldn't put our customers on the hook for $1 million a year range cost for ongoing monitoring, measurement, verification. So that I'll turn it over to. Oh, I forgot to mention poly generation considerations. Yeah, I forgot to have that one on there, but that's something that we talked about on our roundtables a little bit, and that one of the things we are looking at are some other options for the CO2 sequestration, and we've been approached by a lot of different opportunities. Ammonia production doesn't have anything really to do with CO2, but we could use that equipment for that in concert with maybe an algae farm that would generate ethanol. We've also been talking to people who maybe large-scale tomato greenhouses, and then also some aggregate production. And all these would be very for even a medium-sized utility. We're talking about a very large amount of materials generated, but these are maybe there's multiple ones that we could do, and it's interesting. We're pursuing those as we go. And so I'll finish up by just saying that these warm gas plants, these projects, we're proud to be involved with them because we really feel like we've experienced the need for fuel diversity, and during the storms, I guess, are really at the time that maybe 10 years ago, we had a series of them where it was really critical to providing power at this critical time where we needed all of our resources and natural gas wasn't as available. And that's this message that we see from the power plant perspective. Somebody who's implementing these projects definitely need more time to do it smartly. We were able to implement our controls on our pulverized coal plant in a very methodical way that allowed us to really learn from each one and do it more effectively and have the best value for the customers. I'll turn it back over to Shannon. Thank you.
Well, thanks to both Shannon and Byron, and I do have a question each for them, but you have to put up with me for the next maybe 10 minutes, and then we can ask some questions. So we've heard from Shannon a different approach to developing carbon capture technology, as well as what to do with improving the existing fleet, whatever existing fleet we have after we retire a lot, and what we do with any new plant that we build. And then we heard from Byron just some lessons learned of how long it takes to scale up some of this new technology, some of the challenges that are faced, items that you think would integrate together don't, or things that you've always used that work fine, but when you put it with something else, something goes haywire. But the other thing we want to talk about are a lot of unresolved regulatory and legal challenges, not associated with the carbon capture technology, but what you do with the CO2 that you capture. Just briefly, Edison Electric Institute is a trade association for the investor-owned utilities. We have 62 members, very diverse portfolios. Anytime we work on comments to FERC or the EPA, it's a major cat herding exercise, but we get there. It's always a challenge. Back in 2010, President Obama requested that an interagency task force on CCS be pulled together to look at the current status of CCS and what recommendations that they would think would help to accelerate the deployment, wide-scale deployment of CCS within the next 10 years. In 2010, the Interagency CCS Task Force released their report, and we took out this quote: "There are no insurmountable technological, legal, institutional, or other barriers that prevent CCS from playing a role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions." Well, we do believe that those barriers are not insurmountable. However, many of them have not been surmounted. So this is what a lot of people have in their minds when they think about CO2 capture. Something you bolt onto the back of the plant, you just strip off the CO2, and then you put it somewhere. Well, even if it was this simple, you have to empty this bag eventually somewhere. So what are you going to do with the captured CO2? We've heard a lot about enhanced oil recovery and using the captured CO2 for that. The trouble is that a basic, typical 500 megawatt power plant will generate between 3 and 4 million tons of CO2 a year. And if you operate that plant for 40 or 50 years, that's a lot of CO2. If we also put CO2 capture on other carbon-emitting generations, such as natural gas plants, cement facilities, natural gas processing plants, that's a lot of CO2 that has to be put somewhere. This is not a catch-release program. If the only reason you're capturing CO2 is to prevent it from going into the atmosphere, so it has to be permanently sequestered. So we would quickly overwhelm the enhanced oil recovery and the algae manufacturing and the aggregate folks. So we have to do something with that CO2, and that's large-scale geologic storage. And John mentioned some of the work that the Regional Carbon Sequestration Partnership projects have been doing, and it's getting up to 1 million tons a year for our Midland Daniels plant. But we still haven't had a steady project, say 5 or 10 years, constantly injecting 1 million tons or greater to monitor and evaluate how this is working. We need to have monitoring, permitting, and long-term care programs in place to make these large-scale geologic formation storage sites viable. But there's a lot of regulation and legal uncertainty around these sites, and one of the biggest ones is the legal liability. Who is responsible for the CO2 that you inject in the ground after you stop injecting? The Global CCS Institute, which is based out of Australia, came out with a report in 2014 that just defined the different types of legal liability these large-scale CO2 storage sites could find themselves up against. You had civil liability. I actually saw this up in Canada, where a farmer claimed that the CO2 injected at the Weyburn site for enhanced oil recovery had contaminated their wells. You have administrative liability, where the director of the CO2 program in that particular state or province can come up with some sort of enforcement or require a cleanup. And then if you have an emission trading scheme where you get some sort of credit for getting the CO2 stored permanently and something happens where some of it leaks out, an accounting system, you could have liability there also. So legal liability, some people claim it's a red herring, but it's a really big issue for a lot of folks, and until we get it straightened out, it really puts a chill on having anybody do these large-scale CO2 storage sites. Oops. We also have CO2 pipeline challenges. We have about 3,500 miles of CO2 pipelines currently in the United States. These are primarily moving CO2 from naturally occurring sites, deposits into enhanced oil recovery fields. But if we go wide-scale, widely deployable CCS throughout the United States, we're going to need more pipelines. Currently, CO2 pipelines are under the administration of the Surface Transportation Board. And unlike gas pipelines, which are under FERC, CO2 pipelines do not have eminent domain authority. So it means that you have to do more time and more cost to acquire the right-of-ways for putting a CO2 pipeline. And again, like real estate, a CO2 pipeline is location, location, location. If you're in North Dakota, the gasification plant out there that was built only to generate CO2 and other commodities as not a power plant, they transport about 2 million tons a year of CO2 from North Dakota up to the Weyburn field in Canada. They built a 250-mile pipeline, and it only took them 2 years. Well, there aren't many people in North Dakota, so they didn't have that many right-of-ways to acquire. But we had a member company who looked at scaling up their CO2 capture and storage project, which would require a 12-mile pipeline, and they discovered they had over 200 property owners. So that would take a lot of time and add to the cost of the project. So do we want to move CO2 pipeline authority from STD over to FERC? That's a possibility, but that would require congressional legislation, and given how Congress is working at the moment, that might be a little difficult to get. Also, who would own the pipeline? The person that owns or is operating the CO2 storage facility? The person who is wanting their CO2 to be taken away from them? These things still have to be straightened out. We're also seeing, in the past year and a half, challenges to Class 2 and Class 6 permits. As John pointed out, the Class 2 permit is for enhanced oil recovery, has its own set of requirements dealing with well construction, closure, and operation. And Class 6 permits is for geologic sequestration of CO2, and it is a very robust program. And both of these permits are for the protection of underground sources of drinking water. But we saw in the past year and a half actual challenges, litigation against these permits. And while they were resolved in the favor of the defendants, it just adds extra cost and time and delay to these projects. And it makes, again, a disincentive for anyone wanting to do this. It needs to be resolved. There's also conflicting regulation. We're not sure what regulation we're under sometimes. In the Class 6 permit, 9 guidance documents have been issued to help clarify what they meant by Class 6 permit. And EPA also has one that was not finalized and dealt with if you're putting CO2 in the ground as a Class 2 operator, at some point in time, you're no longer producing oil, you're just injecting CO2, so therefore you really need to comply with the requirements of the Class 6 permit, which is more robust, more expensive, and has different reporting requirements and well construction and closure requirements. They got a lot of pushback about this proposed guidance, and recently, last month, they issued a memo, EPA, that tried to straighten out and address these concerns. And I think the memo did a good job addressing many of the concerns. A Class 2 well being Class 2 well, a Class 6 well is a Class 6 well. However, this is a memo. It's not a regulation. It's not even final guidance. So we're not sure what certainty that provides. So just some of the takeaways. There's so much litigation around Class 2 and Class 6. It's just detrimental to investment and deployment. We know there are people out here, such as Schlumberger, who would be happy to make a business model injecting CO2, but they're not willing to do it until they have certainty on if they get the right permit and it's not challenged. If they know who's going to take over the liability once they finish injecting. So there's just a lot of uncertainty going on with large-scale CO2. So while, again, we don't think these barriers are insurmountable, they have yet to be resolved. And until they do that, it'll be hard to move forward with these really large-scale sequestration sites. So that's all I have. And you can always find me at my phone number or email. But at the moment, I'd just like to ask a question to Shannon and one to Byron, and then I can open it up to you guys. Shannon, can you kind of describe the relationship Kirk has with working with DOE and NETL?
So we have, over the years, created a very collaborative working relationship with DOE, both, I think, in an official capacity, I'd like to say, as well as on a sort of unofficial, but just a very mutual working relationship capacity. We have often ongoing discussions both with the headquarters program, the policy people at DOE, as well as the politicals that are appointed at the Department of Energy through the Office of Fossil Energy. And then also, John was formerly over at NETL before he moved to headquarters, and we work very closely with the National Energy Technology Laboratory, which is the laboratory implementing arm of the fossil energy program. So there's a lot of back and forth. We hear them, they hear us. They get the industry perspective. We get the perspective that they have as a federal organization that's trying to administer and implement a program. And how can we make those two work together? Sometimes I think, quite frankly, we realize that we may have differences, and that's the way that we have to go, only because oftentimes the department's programs are politically charged. They have appointees that come in with the new administration and a new secretary that drive policy downward. So we try to work within those frameworks and those structures, but we do work very closely and collaboratively, I would say.
Thanks, Shannon. And Byron, I was really struck by the timeline of the work that's been going on at Fulton, just how long it takes to get these new technologies up and running and demonstrated. How much time do you think you need to get the CO2 capture integration working and also be able to actually do some of the sequestration of the injection water?
Okay, with regard to the time for the CO2 capture to work out this, I think they're on the verge of getting those resolved. Now, the original plan was to have 18 months to kind of simulate the capture of 300,000 tons within a year. So that would given the outages, we just came out of an outage when our main unit is in their normal outage, they're not able to run this system either because it takes a slipstream. So I think just with regard to the capture part of it, I'm thinking that there's been talk about mid-year 2016, so maybe summer 2016 might be enough time to gather some data. I did mention they also, in the same vein, want to demonstrate some multi-contaminant removal systems as well. So I think that's what there's been some discussions about that. With regard to the sequestration, occasionally we'll hear talk about that. We did design one of the wells to accommodate CO2, and that I guess is technically available, but I haven't heard of any discussions in that regard. I'm not sure how long the engineering would take for compression and that type of thing, but they did go pretty far down the road. So it's possible that some, maybe not full 300,000 ton scale, but some demonstration could be done within that same time frame mid next year, I think, to complete this thing. So there's still some opportunities, but we just have to have funding and a commitment to help out with the monitoring, measurement, verification.
Thanks, Mark. Any questions for any of us? I see we've stunned you. Well, thank you.